Republicans are usually pretty confident around election time on the Sun Coast, but this year Democrats are energized and putting up a series of strong candidates. For instance, State House 74 Attorney Tony Mowry, a major in the U.S. Air Force Reserves. He is battling James Buchanan. Sound familiar? The son of Congressman Vern Buchanan, who ran last spring in the special election for House 72. And we welcome you both to the trapezoid, and we're going to give you both a minute for opening remarks. And James, you're going to go first.
I'd like to just start off, Alan, by giving my deepest sympathies to all those that were impacted by this horrific event that occurred in Pittsburgh over the weekend. My name is James Buchanan, and I'm running for State House because I believe we're at a crossroads here. I'm a small business owner. I'm someone that understands the importance of keeping our economy on track, making sure we're continuing to create more good-paying jobs, making sure that future generations have a better opportunity, and that means making sure that we have a great education system here in the state of Florida. Also, there's a lot of local issues that are very important to South County. One is water quality. That is something that comes up more often than anything else. Additionally, I want to talk about River Road. That's something we need to work on, and making sure that we have shelters here in Venice. Thank you.
All right, James, thank you very much. Tony?
Thank you. And I, too, would like to express my sympathies for the victims of the horrific crime in Pittsburgh. My name is Tony Mowry. I'm running for House District 74. I grew up in South County, and I am a 1995 graduate of Venice High School. I went off to college, earned my law degree, and ultimately served over 6 years on active duty in the United States Air Force. In 2013, I decided to move back with my 2 daughters and my wife to Venice to raise my children where I grew up. And the voters have a choice between 2 people. I am simply the best candidate to represent the people of the district because I know the issues, because I live with them every day. I understand the impact that red tide has had on the community. I understand the need to support public education, affordable housing, and health care. And I have ideas to address these issues. So I would ask you to turn out to vote on November 6th or before. Early voting is currently happening. And check the box for me to represent the people of South Sarasota County. Thank you.
Very good. We have to take a quick break, and when we come back, the candidates debate, so stick around. Welcome back to the House 74 debate with Republican James Buchanan and Democrat Tony Mowry. James, we'll start with you. You made reference to the terrible massacre in Pittsburgh over the weekend. You can't get around the fact that in Pittsburgh, in Parkland, Vegas, Sandy Hook, San Bernardino, Aurora, Orlando, an AR-15 was used in all of those gun massacres. And there are people who are saying, isn't it time that the state of Florida, as well as other states, ban these assault-type weapons? What purpose do we have for civilians to own such weapons with large magazines?
Well, Alan, I appreciate the question. I think it's important that we're increasing our security at our schools, like this last piece of legislation did, but also at religious institutions. We also need to make sure that we're addressing mental health. That's another major issue. People slip through the cracks there. My general opinion on this is someone that's really planning to do something horrific will get their hands on a gun one way or the other. So, and banning one particular gun or another, they're going to get their hands on a gun or something else to do this act. So, my position is I'm pro Second Amendment, I'm pro the Constitution, and I don't agree with the idea of banning assault rifles.
Tony?
Well, let me address a little bit of that argument that criminals are going to get guns anyway. Of course that's true, but they're also going to commit murders or jaywalk, and yet we have laws against those. So if we can make it harder for people that want to do harm, for bad people who want to do harm, to get access to the means by which to do that, then I think that's a policy we should all care about. I think in Florida, we can institute universal background checks is one of the easiest and best methods to keep guns out of the hands of bad people. To address the question, though, about assault weapons, you know, Justice Scalia in the Heller decision said that banning military-style weapons is allowable under the Second Amendment. And we really need to look at that and see, you know, I don't necessarily like the term to use the term assault rifle, I like to look at the functionality of the weapon. If it's a weapon of war that's meant to kill as many people in as short amount of time as possible, then I think we can look at that and ban those weapons.
Let me ask this follow-up question, though, because you talked about increased background checks. A background check on Robert Bowers would not have turned out anything. He did not have a criminal record. Law enforcement says that he was not on their radar. He was not convicted of anything. So is it the background check, or is it the availability of these types of weapons?
Well, I think that there's not one answer. Obviously, there's not one answer to any type of crime. But it doesn't make a whole lot of sense that I can go to a gun store and get an FBI background check, but I can go to Craigslist and buy a weapon out of somebody's trunk and have no background check. So
same question to you, James. People who support gun rights often say you don't want to hurt law-abiding civilians. This man, Robert Bowers, was law-abiding until he wasn't.
I think when you look at other parts of the country that have very strict gun laws, there's not a strong correlation between gun violence and those laws. If someone wants to commit a horrific act, they're going to find a way to get their hands on it. We just need to do a better job of mitigating that.
Okay, we have to take another quick break. Our debate for the House 74 district continues right. Welcome back to the House 74 debate with Republican James Buchanan and Democrat Tony Mowry. Gentlemen, I want to ask you both about the competing education plans of both candidates running for governor. Tony, Andrew Gillum is calling for an increase in the corporate tax to pay for teacher wage increases to $50,000, while Ron DeSantis is looking for efficiencies in education spending to increase the numbers of vouchers out there for kids to go to private schools. Which approach do you support and why?
Well, I don't support the DeSantis approach. I answered this question in the Herald Tribune about the corporate tax hike. I support increasing teacher pay and increasing per pupil spending, because right now in Florida we're at the bottom fifth in both categories. But I don't know that a corporate tax hike such that Gillum is proposing is the right way to go. I think that there are other efficiencies within the budget itself to find the money to increase teacher pay and per pupil spending. For example, shifting money to private schools is one thing that's happening in Florida to an extreme, and I think if we need to stop doing that and properly fund our public schools. For-profit charter schools, voucher programs, those are all draining the funds of our public schools. And really what we need to do is address that, and instead of continuing to raid public school funds for the benefit of for-profit charters and voucher programs.
James?
I believe it's important we put parents in charge, give them the opportunity to put their kids in an environment in which they can learn the best, especially when you're looking at someone that's being bullied, or if there's an issue as it relates to a learning disability. Those are issues that we need to take a closer look at. I agree with the DeSantis approach. You look at who this impacts, who this really impacts. It's the lower end of the social economical scale. These are the people that are impacted disproportionately if you do away with this, with what DeSantis has said that he wants to do.
Let me ask you a follow-up to that while we have time. The Sarasota School District is on a pretty good financial footing right now, but there are school districts around the state, including up the road in Hillsborough County, which are so cash-strapped that they don't have running air conditioners and they have problems with mold. If you are increasing the money going out to vouchers, aren't you taking away that kind of capital money available for local schools?
It's very important that we're properly funding our public education system. I agree that's something we need to definitely focus on. And as it relates to that, there's other areas in the budget where we can contribute more money to that portion of the school system. But 100% we need to be spending and giving more attention to our public school system. I've never said anything to the contrary of that.
And Tony, let me ask you a follow-up. You talked about looking for efficiencies elsewhere to help fund the teacher pay increases. Efficiencies alone are going to be enough to boost teacher salaries to $50,000 a year?
Well, I didn't put a number on the teacher salary. That's Mayor Gillum's number. But yes, we actually have 17.5 billion in tax expenditures that doesn't get reported in the budget. That is mostly targeted corporate tax breaks. And while some of them might promote industries that are good, not all of them do, and they don't get a regular review in the budget. So we've got almost a fifth of Florida's budget out there that doesn't get a regular review, that goes to targeted tax breaks primarily to corporations. So I think there is money in the budget, and I think if we stop, one, shifting money over to for-profit charter schools and voucher programs, and two, look at these tax expenditure issues, I think I'm confident that we can find the money to increase teacher pay.
All right, we have to take another quick break. We are just getting warmed up. Our debate for House District 74 will continue after this break. Welcome back to the House 74 debate with Republican James Buchanan and Democrat Tony Mowry. James, we obviously have been struggling with the issue of red tide. We still are, and there has been a debate or renewed debate in terms of how to address what, on one hand, is a naturally occurring thing. On the other hand, there are questions about what we've been doing that's contributing to how serious it has been this summer. So, looking at the problem and looking at the issue of nutrients going into the water, fertilization, big sugar, and the green slime, what needs to be done right now instead of just saying, you know, more money for research to Moat Marine?
Sure. Well, if you look back historically, Alan, you know, this has been a naturally occurring phenomenon for some time. The Spanish documented it when they came over. They had documented it and killed off almost the entire bay. So this is something that's been going on for a long time. But there's no question, most scientists would say that there is a human element, a correlation of which attributes to it. So one thing that's without question, a lot of people believe is when you look at the tremendous increase in Florida's population over the years, obviously, you know, red tide is something that's occurring offshore and the green slimes inland. If you start off by addressing what's going on inland with the green slime, if you look at what's happened in Miami over the years with development north of the river, that ecological system's been entirely disrupted. Everything's been straightened. Nothing filters out anymore. That's something that has changed. Now, one thing that is being done to address it is this proposal of the reservoir south of the lake as it relates to the green slime. I think that's something that should be a good alternative here. It's something that's going to prevent future dumps of water. But
we have to leave it right there.
Okay, right, we'll get back to it.
Thank you, Alan. There are a lot of things that we can do right now. It is naturally occurring, but it has been exacerbated by human activity, and that comes straight from Moat Marine, who said this is not normal. The nutrients that are running off from agricultural lands, from household fertilizers, are feeding this stuff. In addition, what Moat Marine has said is that the water temperature affects the growth of the red tide. So sea level rise and global warming is something that we need to begin seriously addressing. I agree that we need to clean up Lake Okeechobee. There's some evidence that the discharges down the Caloosahatchee River are feeding the red tide. And so I would agree that we need to reverse the flow, change the flow back to the natural flow of the Everglades down south rather than discharging the green slime. Additionally, we need to reinstitute the septic tank inspection program that the Republican leadership killed in 2012 because that's yet another nutrient source that's running in and feeding this issue. So there's not necessarily one answer, but it's holding people who are polluting accountable, putting teeth back into the Department of Environmental Protections, and making sure that we protect our waterways.
Tony, let me ask you the follow-up question, because you referenced sea level rise and temperature change. Under Governor Rick Scott, state workers have not been allowed to use the word climate change and sea level rise. Is this something that the legislature has a role in terms of putting into some kind of legislation in terms of addressing Florida's, what Florida can do about this?
Well, I think we need to put people and policy before politics. I mean, that's the most important thing, and that's not what's going on up there. I think we can, yes, as the legislature, we can have oversight over the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. You know, the legislature holds the purse strings, so, you know, negotiating with the governor. The bottom line is we don't know who's going to be the governor and what the policies are going to be going forward after the election, but we need to start putting facts before politics.
James, same question to you. Has it been a mistake of Governor Rick Scott to ban state workers from using just the phrase climate change?
Look, I agree, Alan, that red tide, you know, this should be a bipartisan issue. It should be something both parties are working on. As it relates to climate change, I've said in a number of different interviews that I believe that this is something that's real. It's been something that's been occurring periodic warming and cooling over over tens of thousands of years. Is it something we contribute to? Yeah, it probably is. The question is, how much are we actually contributing to this? And do we want to do? Why don't we look at this from a free markets approach? When the technology becomes available, this will be something where the free markets will take hold of, and it will become a big part of our economy.
All right. Next question. Both of you gentlemen probably want to do a lot of different things when you get up to Tallahassee, but James, what is the one issue above all others you want to go there and have an impact on? What is the one bill? What is the one topic?
Gosh, Alan, that's such a great question because there's so many. So I'd like to touch on a few, but I'll touch on
one. First one.
One of the major issues locally that I'd like to see expedited is River Road. You know, this is something we more recently did a road swap with, and it's something that can be expedited. We're currently 6 hurricane seasons away from seeing this project go underway. So I think infrastructure is something I've heard over and over again and going to doors. This is something that's very important to this community. River Road would be one project I'd like to see expedited. Additionally, we could look at, as it relates to jobs in the economy, that's another area I'm very passionate about. We're one of the only states in the country that has a business rent tax. I'd like to see that further reduced.
All right, same question to you, Tony. If there was one issue that you could have impact on there, whether it's sponsoring a bill or whatever, what would that be?
Well, I think on a very micro level, I think we need to look at the certificate of need process because for hospitals, because Northport needs a hospital. There's 2 going in Venice, and Northport is still stuck without a hospital. Part of that touches on just the need for an anchor in Northport to provide good jobs for people, provide income and also access to health care. My wife was telling me before we went on that she knocked on a door and a woman in Northport has to drive all the way to Port Charlotte to get kidney dialysis every day. And that's just not the right way to approach it. Northport is a large city, so that's a very small issue, but it would have a huge impact on District 74.
I want to ask you both about one other issue that is one of the most important issues of our time. Obviously, we all know with Judge Kavanaugh now on the Supreme Court, the balance of the Supreme Court has changed, which may raise the question about if there's a case in terms of Roe versus Wade, overturning that. If that gets to the Supreme Court, it may well be overturned, which would leave it up to states like Florida to decide whether abortion rights would still be illegal in Florida. Tony, if you were in the legislature, would you vote for or against making abortion illegal?
Well, first of all, it's still a constitutional right, so I don't, according to the Supreme Court.
If it was overturned by the Supreme Court.
But if it was overturned by the Supreme Court, I believe it should be legal, but I believe it should be rare, because back prior to Roe, we saw what happened to women who got back room, back door, back alley abortions, and it was a tragedy. But the point that I'd like to make on this is that we know how to reduce abortions. We know people go get abortions because of unwanted pregnancies, and we know how to reduce unwanted pregnancies through education and access to health care and contraceptives. So I am for that. I am for reducing abortions to the lowest level possible, but not making it illegal and dangerous for women.
All right, James, same question to you. If Roe versus Wade were overturned and it was up to Florida and other states to either make abortion continue to be legal or illegal, which way would you vote?
Well, again, I think that's a major hypothetical because of the laws that are currently in place. But I'm a pro-life guy. You know, I have a daughter. She's 17 months old. When she was a child, I went to all of her sonogram appointments, and so I understand where life begins. I'm a pro-life person, and I do not believe in tax-funded payer abortions. I do not believe in the idea of using abortion as contraception, and so you know, I don't like the idea of abortions outside of a very rare circumstance.
Okay, we have 1 minute left. I want to ask you both a quick question. The Marjorie Stoneman Douglas School Safety Act that was passed, many communities, including our community here, has been struggling to pay for SROs or guardians in every school. James, how would you pay for that? Because the legislature has not provided enough money.
Well, Alan, that's an issue of which, if you were to ask me the one thing I'd like to see that wasn't in there, that would be it. I'd like to see that I'd like to see that aspect funded. I think there's a number of different ways we could look at, as a fiscal conservative, shrinking the government as a whole. We have 115,000 employees. That's something we can look at. Another thing that we can take a serious look at, Alan, is tort reform. That's something that's been a major issue in the state.
A quick answer to that also.
Sure, tort reform doesn't have anything to do with the budget, but I would have, yes, I agree that the legislature hung these counties out to dry and we need to find those funds. I've already talked about the tax expenditures. That's $17.5 billion that's not reviewed annually that we need to look at. We could look at prison reform issues. We could look at Enterprise Florida, but there's a lot of areas in which to look.
Okay, we have to take another quick break, and when we come back, the candidates will have closing statements, so stay with us. Welcome back. Time for closing statements, and Tony, we begin with you.
All right, thank you. I said at the beginning that you have a choice in this election, the people of South Sarasota County. It's a choice between two people, not two parties. And I think when you evaluate the two candidates and see how they stand on the issues, the command of the issues, the connections to the area, you'll vote for me. The bottom line is there's a reason why the local newspaper in Inglewood, Northport, and Venice endorsed me, because they know I have the experience, the capacity, and the local knowledge to best represent the people of District 74, South Sarasota County, my home. And I ask for your vote on November 6th or before if you go out for early voting. Thank you.
Thank you, James.
My name is James Buchanan, and I'm running for State House District 74. I'm not a politician, I'm a small businessman. As a kid, South County, District 74 was the first place that we moved. This is an area that I understand the issues that are impacting, and I want to go up there to fight for you each and every day. I'm someone, when I go to the doors, I give out my phone number. People say I'm crazy for it, but at the end of the day, it's about going up to work for you, who's going to do the best job for you, and who's going to be accessible, because it's important to be accessible if you're going to be the next state representative for 74. So thank you for tonight, Alan, and look forward to a future debate.
All right, James. Tony, thank you very much. We want to thank House candidates Republican James Buchanan and Democrat Tony Mowry.